If you ask the average citizen in Columbia, South Carolina about Harbison, chances are they'll immediately think about the bustling commercial corridor that houses one of the city's biggest shopping malls, the Columbiana Center. But if they look a little closer, they might notice a college campus. Nestled between some hardwood trees is a school with a fascinating history dating back to 1911. This is the story of Harbison Institute, a school that provided educational opportunities for students during a time period when options were limited.
I am Ruby Nixon Shumpert. I graduated from Harbison Agricultural Industrial Institute in 1937, and that has been a long time ago.
At that time, South Carolina did not have public education program. Each town had its own high school, and in the rural areas, the churches had a school that went from first to third or fourth grade. And this was the only school in the area at that time for blacks that they could go all the way through high school.
Well, Harbison was the only school that served after you got as far as, what, 6, when you left the 6th grade? Harbison was the only one that served us here. See, Irmo High was there, but now we couldn't go there.
Harbison was a school that was organized under the auspices of the Board of National Missions. At one time it was called the Board of Freedmen, because at the time it was not far removed from the days of slavery. It was funded by the Board of National Missions of the Presbyterian Church, now called the United Presbyterian Church in the United States of America.
There was a Mr. Harbison who had given a donation for the building of this institution, and it was named for him.
Mr. Harbison decided to buy property in the Irmo section. He came and he made it his business to be head of this project, to get those buildings built and get the school back on its foot.
I have one brother, Ralph Harbison Bulwick. He was named for the founder of Harbison Institute.
We had some problems with kids walking and buses passing with other ethnic group, throwing things out at them. And of course, now those came up as little things that we wanted to correct. We heard then we were going to get some buses, and we wanted to know, where are these buses coming from? Because all the black kids walked to school. So we found out that the Board of Mission, or some of the people, had supplied enough money to buy 2 buses.
After we got transportation, we thought we were somebody.
But I remember the children used to walk from here to Harbison daily. And to get up in the morning and walk from here to Harbison, a pretty good walk. You got to get out there pretty early, and it would be cold some morning too. Much colder then than it is now. The bell would ring, and a lot of times you'd be out there rushing trying to get there. Once you hear the bell ring, then you got to hurry up then, sure enough.
I always wanted to ring that bell, and they would never let me ring it. I would go out and I'd beg to ring it. They wouldn't let me ring it, and I'd go out sometimes and look around. If I didn't see anybody, I'd go and ring that bell.
Every morning when we came to school, we were kind of regimented. It was, you marched into the chapel.
We always had to have a devotion, and students would participate in the devotion. And of course, that was vital at Harbison, religion. And we were taught religion, had religious courses.
I took English through the 4 years, including English literature and all of that. The social studies, chemistry, French, 1 year French, and 1 year Latin. And my math classes were math was algebra 1, geometry, plane and solid.
In the afternoon, then we had home ec. First thing we did was to make a buttonhole. And then from that, she let us use the machine to make an apron.
Of course, it was Harbison Industrial and Agriculture, so they were also known, for agriculture. In fact, it was I would like to say self-supporting, but I mean they raised all of their own food and meats.
Everybody there had a duty to perform, and that was cleaning the dormitory, cleaning the kitchen, waiting on the tables, helping in the kitchen to prepare the foods, and the whole campus was taken care of by the students.
Harbison also had a sawmill that was in this community, well, just about a mile and a half up the road here. As a matter of fact, when Harbison built the gym, a lot of the lumber was cut from their own mill.
We would pick the peas, the Crowder peas, we call them, or the black-eyed peas, and bring them in to the dining hall and make a circle in the evenings after we finish our dinner, and we would shell those peas. And it was really a glorious time because we would start singing all the hymns, and it made the work chore easy.
One of the things that I enjoyed at Harbison was music. Miss Jenny Young was my music teacher. We sang the songs, Bringing in the Sheaves, This Little Light of Mine.
They had a crackerjack choir. Yeah, they used to go to Charlotte, North Carolina, in different places and sing. They had a good choir.
Miss Newby, she had one of the most dynamic choirs that has ever been in this area, I imagine. She would compete with those at Allen University, Benedict, or whatever other colleges.
Music was very important, and we had students who took music, and we had, I don't remember having any cantatas, but we had boys whose voices were very good. We had some young Paul Robinsons there.
This little light of mine, Lord, I'm going to let it shine. Oh, this little light of mine, Lord, I'm going to let it shine.
During Harbison's early years, they seem to have had a lot of emphasis on sports. And before I came, they had baseball.
Yeah, Harbison had a fair team. Sometimes we would win, sometimes we would lose.
My husband was there in the late 20s, and he often spoke about the team going to Columbia and playing Benedict College. There were boys in the neighborhood who were good ball players, and they would come over and watch the team when they were practicing and were allowed to play with the boys, with the Harbison boys. And to some degree, they kind of joined the team on campus and played with them when they had visiting teams. They often boast about helping Harbison to win.
They had basketball. I played basketball. And at that time, they had 3-court rules. Perhaps you don't know about it. 3-court rules instead of 2-court.
We'd go to other schools. We'd go to Brainerd. We'd go to Augusta. There was a school in Augusta we'd play. There was one school known as Jenkinsville, because we were city people, at that time. They were country girls. They would beat us every time. Every time and all the time. It was a small school. But see, we at Harbison, we were big time,
And then the thing about it, that the other students got joy out of laughing at us getting beat because we were so sincere and wanted very badly, you know, to beat them at least one time. And they would just laugh about us getting beat. They would laugh because they knew how much we wanted to beat them, because every time it seemed like we played them twice a year. And they would whip us twice a year too.
Harbison itself was really a beacon light to us. We looked forward, and Harbison was a blessing.
And another thing that made me love Harbison, they were community-oriented.
Our communities could come in and see some things that they wouldn't have seen ordinarily right here at Harbison.
They would come to Harbison. They just kind of looked to Harbison for leadership. That's where they got the plays and the education. Mama said they would come from up there to the different cantatas and things that they had at Harbison, and they just loved Harbison. They had beautiful music, and well, that was kind of rare for us to have pianos and this kind of thing. But she said they had some beautiful plays there.
We had excerpts from Shakespeare. Because I remember I was Lady Macbeth during the sleepwalk, when she was trying to wash her hands from the blood that that wasn't there. Another thing they had while I was there, I might mention this, was a room they called the North Room. A lot of boys came to Harbison without means. They were short on things. And the National Board of Mission, which was, I think, located in Pennsylvania, or in one of the northern states, did a lot of supporting of the students while they were there. And it kind of flowed over into the community. People in the community were allowed one day to come over and pick out items that they could use for their children or for their household.
They would share them with people that they thought were in need of whatever they had in the North Room.
They had clothes from infants to grown-ups, female and male.
We also had a club known as the Big Sisters Club. It was a club that was organized to raise funds to pay the teachers 2 months in the Pine Grove area. Students there were only going to school 4 months. So this club was organized to raise money to pay the teachers 2 extra months.
And it was a good learning thing for the people in the area. I remember my mother telling us once about when she was a teenager, and Harbison had just come in this area in 1911 or 12. I think it was before she married, or about the time she was married. Said there was a man who came around to their churches making speeches to the people. And she said she remember one coming once and said, "It's not ladies." He said, "When you come to church," he said, "pull those rags off your head and take off those aprons and get your hat." And she said that stuck out in her because there were some older ladies who always would tie up their heads and come to church, and they had their big, pretty white aprons on. And he said that made them think that they were still a part of that slave community that they once lived in. And he wanted them to dress up and come to church and take those rags off your head and put a hat on. And when she told us that, then I knew that Harbison did more for the community than just educated their children.
We had some wonderful teachers, though. They were so dedicated. If you didn't learn at Harbison, you couldn't learn.
One in particular was a French teacher. He was a young man out of college, came to work to Harbison, taught French. His name was Mr. Jones, but his French students called him Professor Nespa. I had a correspondent with a French girl in France, so we could write letters, and he would see that we got them. addressed properly and mailed. And of course, we'd put it half in English, half in French. And it was during the years when, after or before, the King of England had abdicated the throne. Which one was that, Edward? And I remember receiving information, about that. I don't know if it was history or what it was, but those things kind of stick in my mind. And when I went to college, I kept that corresponding up. I took French in college when I went there. And that was one of the highlights in my life, of having correspondence with a French girl.
My favorite teacher, to tell you the truth, I did not have a favorite. I loved all of them. And I was afraid of one. And I think I learned more under her than I learned. I didn't know anything about operas and music, the history behind some of these songs, like Chopin and all of these big music people. Miss Newby was a dynamic teacher. I will never forget, she was preparing us to go to the opera at the Township Auditorium. So she got us ready for Macbeth. And I became interested in going to the operas. My years away from home, well, in fact, I lived in Washington, D.C. for 4 years. So I would make it my business to see what was playing at the Opera House, so I could go. And because I was taught to appreciate opera.
Miss Jenny Young was my favorite teacher.
I thank God that Miss Jenny Young started me off, and I still enjoy singing today.
We would walk up from the school up to her house, and we would sit on the steps, and she would have little crackers or whatever, a little drink or something for us, and we always enjoyed that. And in other words, she made all her students feel special. She was entertaining us, but she was training us all at the same time. Some of the things that they taught, I think, will always be instilled in us. They were just all special people to me. They all added something to my life.
When I attended, there was Dr. J.G. Porter, who was president. He was a very stern, dignified man. He walked very erect, and he didn't have to say it but once.
He was a kind person. He'd meet you and speak and maybe have a little conversation with you, but he was always about his business.
Very quiet and sneaky when we didn't want to sneak up. I didn't mean that. I didn't get that, did you? And see, the office is here, the auditorium is here, and sometimes we would just come downstairs and have conversations, and you could always tell when he was coming because he had a bunch of keys, and you could hear these keys rattling, so you knew to disappear.
Dr. Porter was just a stern administrator, and we looked to him as our leader and our guide, and when he walked up, we just felt that we had to stand erect and speak politely and do everything that a young lady should do when a gentleman was around. We didn't giggle, and our deportment was very, very much kept in tune with being a lady. And of course, there was Dean Boulware. He was the father of Harold Boulware, who became Judge Boulware in Richland County. And he was the one really who saw that the students toward the line. He was more than just the dean of the academics, but he took care of the disciplinary problems and everything.
Dean Boulware always was trying to, well, he knew to take a child and send them back home. They was here to try to better their condition, and you send them back home. Wasn't going to do nothing but send him back to a lower grade of life. And he just tried all he could to keep you. And this is why they give them a chance to go to the farm and work. If you did something wrong, you go out and work 3 or 4 days, come back and you're okay. But if you don't want to work, then you pack your bags and send you home.
We had some guidelines because the boys had to get accustomed to having girls on campus. We had guidelines when we were out for the recreation period. We could congregate and talk, but usually the boys on campus were in the dining hall eating dinner. After school, they could walk home with the girls, those who were walking, but they had destinations they couldn't cross, certain highways or a creek that they couldn't cross. They could walk that far with the girls, but they couldn't go any farther.
It was strict, but you were allowed to talk to them because I had plenty of boyfriends at home.
They had social hour on Sunday at 4 o'clock in the auditorium. And then at 6 o'clock, you had vespers. You just sat there and talked, and then the Dean of Women, I can't even remember her name now, but she would sit like up front, and then you know how the pews are. And you just sit in the pews. The heavy couples would sit as far as they could from her. She'd sit up front and she'd not. And if you get too close together, she would say, "Move, Miss So-and-so. Now sit up straight."
Many of the students who attended Harbison didn't only date while they were here, but they carried a little farther because they continued their courtship, and most of them ended in marriage. On down the ages of Harbison, I could name you 20 or 30 couples that married. Fletcher Bognite married Ruth Harmon. A.P. Richardson married Pauline Blocker. Talicious Loman married Thomas Kennelly. Barton Shumpert married Ruby Nixon. And I could go on and on.
Mrs. T.B. Jones was living here at the time. She used to like to entertain. So when she heard that I was getting married, she wanted to have a shower for me. Somebody else wanted to furnish the cake, Miss Newby. She said, "Well, if I play for your wedding, can I come?" Mrs. Jones, in addition to doing the bridal shower, took pictures. I mean, I don't know what it would have been if they hadn't done all this for me.
When I graduated, I went to Allen University for the summer. And as I said, my brother kept bringing him over to the house. I guess he was trying to say, well, I'm going to find somebody for my sister. About halfway through the year, I guess I noticed him because he kept coming to the house. He kept coming by, and so I told somebody, I said, well, I'm going to marry him to get rid of him because he's on my doorstep every time I open the door. 64 years later, so he must have done something right.
We never forget Harbison because we had nowhere else to go or nothing else to do. So Harbison will never leave me. I'll always have her in my heart.
I was looking at some records of Harbison, of the number of lawyers, doctors, teachers, and name it, other professions, that many of these students continued their education, and this was their career, and they went into these careers. And this is where they got their training, right there at Harbison.
It really made a lot of strong women and men in this area. And without Harbison having been there, we could not have done that. Without Harbison, I think we would have been at a loss for improving our status in life.
It's just so nice to every now and then come back to Harbison, because I wonder, if had it not been for Harbison, where would I be? Where would I be today?